Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome to the Neurodiversity podcast. You are a doctor. You concern yourself with autism, and you're autistic yourself. And the two of us, we got in touch with one another on LinkedIn. There was a discussion about the neurodiversity movement, and you were part of that discussion. And I thought it was interesting the way you voiced your skepticism with it. And today I want to have a conversation with you. I want to hear from you. Why are you skeptical about the idea of the neurodiversity movement? And I think the first thing we probably have to do for that is we're going to have to define what it is. So I'll let you go first. But
let's have a clarification as well, and that is I'm not a medical doctor.
Oh, okay.
I'm a PhD doctor.
You are a?
PhD doctor.
PhD doctor. Oh, that means that you have a doctor from a university. You're not a medic. Yes, okay, got it. Yes.
Yeah.
And what did you originally study?
Well, my doctorate was in artificial intelligence.
Oh, fascinating.
Actually, image processing.
Mm-hmm.
It gave me research skills.
So you studied AI. When did you do that? When did you finish your PhD?
I submitted my thesis at the end of 1994.
1994, okay.
A long time ago.
Okay, so that was probably the early steps of image recognition, right?
Fairly early steps, yeah. That was before everything became neural networks.
Okay, yeah, but I think you're touching at one of the core problems that they still have today, I think. And that is a problem that also relates to autism, in my opinion. The world can be interpreted in many different ways. And I think one of the hardest, or at least, like, I'm not an expert on AI, but that's what I picked up from reading about it. One of the hardest things is making the computer mind see the world in a way that relates to how we see the world, because otherwise it won't make sense. Is that correct?
Well, the current state of the art is the computer understands nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you start from that, you won't go too far wrong. But anyway, we were talking about neurodiversity.
Yes.
Right? So for me, neurodiversity is a political movement. It's political. It is not scientific. And I think a lot of the problems comes with it is when people assume there's a scientific basis when there isn't. So, for example, people talk about neurotypes. There being an underlying assumption that autism, ADHD, whatever, that there's a biological and neurological difference between that condition and whatever normal is. But that has never been proven. That's not scientific. It's purely a theory and assumption.
Yeah, I agree. Have you come across about the intense world theory by Henry Markram?
Oh, there's loads of different theories.
Okay, but you've never
Oh yeah, I know about that one.
They at least did some studies on rats. They didn't get to the humans yet, but it's something I put at the core of my work. The idea that autism is not, and you would probably disagree with that. I would argue that at the core, autism is not. Is actually a physical disability, in my sense. That's how I would define it. I'm convinced that there is there's a difference on the hardware level in the brain, and it.
Well, nothing has been proven on that.
Yes, I know. That's why I called it intense world theory. It's just a theory, yes, but. from the way I perceive the world, it made sense to me. And I know that's anecdotal. Again, that is not scientific. That's just anecdotal.
Yeah. But the problem is that it doesn't matter which theory of autism you're looking at. It applies to some autistic people and not others.
Okay.
That's the problem. So there's a theory that autism's about sensory issues. That's where Olga Bogdashina comes from. For Olga Bogdashina, autism is all about sensory issues. Until you meet a few autistic people who don't have sensory issues. You could say autism is all about processing issues. But there are quite a few autistic people who don't have processing issues. You can say it's all about weak central coherence. Or you could say it's about systematization. Or you could say it's about executive functioning.
Well, I always say that whatever quality of autism you define, you will find one autistic person that's the exact opposite of that. Or at least one autistic person that's the exact opposite.
And there's a fundamental flaw with all these theories of what autism is. And that is, they all assume that autism is a homogeneous something. Whereas you talk to anyone who actually works with autistic people, and they will tell you it's far from homogeneous.
In my head, it's kind of like a matrix as opposed to like a linear function, you know? Because a linear function has one value that's mapped onto another value, where a matrix has a set of values that is mapped onto another set of values. And I always, like, again, my mental image on it is that there is a core hardware difference that is so fundamental that there is a bunch of different outcomes, but they're all encompassed by it.
Yeah, what I find in my work, you can have an underlying issue that could have several different possible symptoms. But you also have a single symptom that could have several possible underlying things causing it. So basically, there isn't a single something wrong. There's a whole multitude of possible things wrong. And I would take your matrix theory further and make it multidimensional. And then you get to tensor theory, which is really quite horrible.
What theory?
Tensor, that's multidimensional matrices.
Okay.
So instead of having a square 3x3 matrix, you could have a cube 3x3x3, or you could have 4-dimensional one, 4x4x4x4.
I'm always open to more complexity. So
yeah. For me, autism is a complex multidimensional.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many dimensions.
Yeah.
I haven't managed to figure out how many dimensions. All I know is that at the last count, I was well over 50 different possible underlying issues.
But I would argue that we don't really understand what a human being is. Like, even for normal people, we cannot say, like, what is that? Where does the body stop and the soul begin, or the other way around? Like, whatever you want to call it. Where does the mind start? Where does the body begin? Like,
and then you can look at other things of it. Like, you've got a mother who's got some quirks. You've got some father that got some quirks. The quirks in neither the mother nor the father add up to autism. But then you've got the child who's inherited all the quirks from the mother and all the quirks from the father. And that does turn into autism.
That might be me. I mean, I'm actually convinced that my father is autistic, but he doesn't have a diagnosis. And I mean, he's from a much different generation. And I don't think he's going to get one in his life. Like, that ship has sailed. I think my mother has some quirks in that direction. But yeah, for my father, I would say probably fits in that category. Like,
Well, studies have been done, and the results were that nearly everybody has some autistic traits.
yes, I would agree with that.
Doesn't necessarily add up to autism,
Yes.
but but everything in autism is found to a certain extent in the general population.
Well, I have called.
Well, one common thing about autism is processing issues.
Mm-hmm.
You go and ask the general population, and you will find people who have really fast processing. They're the really witty people, who can really think on their feet.
Mm-hmm.
So they have fast processing. And then you have people with slower processing who prefer to think about things before coming to a decision. Who just need a bit more time to process things. And this is all part of normal human variation.
Cat content, very good.
Yeah, this is Alpha.
The video just got better. Yes. Okay, now I kind of lost my thread.
So you take sensory issues, for example. So I'll continue my thread and you might go back. We've got sensory issues. They are quite widespread in the general population.
Oh yes. What I was gonna answer you is that while I have called autism a disability, and even in this talk, I do think it's kind of a human variance, and it fills a niche,
Well, everybody's different.
Yeah, but I mean, as we think of us back in the steppe, just running around, maybe a tribe of 150 people. And not a lot of shelter. You needed people to have a certain robustness, and people who could hunt, people who could fight other strong beings to protect the tribe. They were needed, right? They were a necessity for the tribe even to sustain itself. And you would have room for a shaman or someone who's more spiritual or is more in their head. You would have room to carry one or two of that kind of capacity as well in your tribe. But if you had, if your tribe was 150 people and you had 148 shamans and 2 strongmen, that tribe wouldn't last very long. Okay? And, but we've come a long way from that. We have more room in our tribes now for shamans, for engineers, for doctors, whatever. We don't need that many strong men anymore. And I think that there has always been a niche for autistic people as inventors, as people who look at things and see things that other people haven't seen. To see a new aspect, to innovate something, to question something. And I think that there has always been room in societies for people with autism or related conditions to question things, to push things forward. Would you agree to that idea?
If you think about it in your example, if you think of primitive don't like to call them primitive tribes because they're not primitive at all. But you would have the people who would spend time with the stones, with the metals, figuring out how and what and how to do it.
Yeah, I'm always thinking there was probably one person in the back of the cage and they had a piece of flint and another piece of rock, and it just, they would just combine those two again and again and again and maybe rock a bit back and forth while they did it. And eventually they started a fire with the dry material they had gathered, because while the others were hunting, they were interested in the dry material that they gathered for some reason. And then they combined that and then they created fire. or a process to make fire. They didn't create the fire.
Maybe, or maybe you have somebody who's really interested in different plants and their healing properties. You know, there's always been room in human societies for different ways of being, different ways of thinking. And, you know, there's plenty of historical evidence that there's always been autism. Maybe not in the proportions that we have now, but there always has been, if you look back in the historical record.
I like. Do you know the person Henry Cavendish?
I've heard of him. Don't really know much about him.
He's a scientist from the 17th century, and there's some writing about him. He's a light. Like, how did they say it? He's a light that illuminates everything but warms nothing. That is what they said about him.
Right.
So he must have been clever, but maybe a bit cold.
There's quite a few people. There's even a monk who seems to have been autistic and was forever getting into trouble. There's quite a lot of stories that make you go.
Exactly, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's always existed.
Okay, let's take it back to
But I think it's maybe, you know, I think in smaller groups, difference is, or even disability of that kind of thing is probably more accepted. You know, I think the problem that we've had, or a lot of the problems we're facing today, is averages. You know, so you've got the average pathway of child development. And if your child deviates significantly from that, well, that's bad.
Yeah, that's...
100 years ago, they'd have been much less worried about it.
That's something I really hate about the current age. Everything has a number to it, you know? Or not everything, but a lot of things are being put... Like, people will put a post on a social media site, and then you get this many shares, this many likes, this many interactions. Everything is a number. And then people see a bunch of numbers and they think to themselves, I see a bunch of numbers. Now I know what's going on. But you only see the numbers of the things that you attribute numbers to. There might be other things going on in the background that aren't so easily measurable in a single number. And so...
Well, the problem is, when it comes to measuring, people tend to measure what they can measure, or what's easy to measure, rather than what's sensible to measure. And as soon as you have a measurement system in place, people will work to maximize their measurements.
Exactly, yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then quality deteriorates.
Yes, there's... I don't know how much you are on social media, but there's hashtags like looks maxing. Looks maxing is where you try to optimize the way you look. Or there's body maxing where you will try to get to your optimal level of physical fitness and so on. And it's always this dull fixation with numbers, and people think in superlatives, you know? Like only the best. Like that's all that matters. There's no, I'm just going to have a nice day. I'm not going to go into any extreme today. I'm just going to, you know, see where it takes me. Like a lot of that is disappearing, is getting less. And there's always this, I got to take it to the maximum. And that's all that counts. Like,
well, you see, you're kind of hitting the nail on the head here. What we are missing, or rather what's being taken to extremes and then twisted, is just plain simple individuality. You are the person you are with your unique mix of strengths and weaknesses. you belong to a community, and you've got to get the balance between individual and community right. So you might be very good at stealing, but it's not really a good idea. Good for your community in the long run.
Yes. I live in a very rural community right now in Switzerland. Small village of 1,000 people. There's, of course, other small villages of 1,000 people that are not so far off. But where I live in Germany, that's actually one of the most populated areas in all of Europe, where this is a not very densely populated area. And there's such an enormous difference in the way people treat one another, and how there's room for individuality here in the village, but not where I live in Germany. Or individuality is welcome here. I was going to say celebrated, but maybe that's taken too far. It's welcome here. Where when I go back to Germany, where everything is a lot more dense, I'm getting, like, at an increasing number, at an increasing frequency, I get the feeling that when people are met with an idea that they're not yet familiar with, they're not interested, they're scared. There's some sort of discomfort at the core that they're feeling. And they may be polite about it, but that's just how it feels. A lot of people seem just very uncomfortable with things that they are not yet familiar with. And
well, the thing is, in the village, people know each other.
Yeah, here I say hello to everyone. Like, I greet everybody. I couldn't do that in where I live in Germany, because my vocal cords probably wouldn't go with that. There's just too many of those people. I can't say hi to everyone.
But you see, you don't know everybody. In the village, you'll know everybody by sight.
Eventually you do,
even if you don't know them very well. But in this city, you can't do that. And that leads to a whole different dynamic. People have studied this thing with businesses and things. That once you get to round about, as your business grows up to 150 people, you can know all your employees.
Yeah.
Right? You can know them all by name. You can know what they do. Once you get much beyond that 150, it becomes much more impersonal.
Yeah, that's a mark-off that I've seen.
You can't know everybody anymore.
Yeah, that's a mark-off that I've seen in a lot of literature. It's usually somewhere between 150 or 250 people. It's
going to be one of those things that's going to be individual for the, an individual thing. Some people can do it for more people, some people for less.
But somewhere between 150 and 250 seems to be the cutoff where things become impersonal. Okay.
And then, of course, the more it grows beyond that, it can only get more impersonal.
True, yeah. Yeah, and so, I would definitely agree with you in the modern world, with these large-scale societies, there seems to be less room for individuality. And that is always also something that we can take from evolutionary biology. It seems that when you have animals that live in very small populations, there's a lot of room for individuals. Like, think of wolves. Like, wolves are, they have personality. But you get to numbers like ants or bees, and then you have drones, like parts of the tribe, and they have very, very little individuality. They are very much like, and I think that.
Or maybe they do have individuality, but we can't see it.
That's true. That's true.
You can't rule that out.
But yes, you're right. You can't rule that out. But I would assume that there's less individuality, but because I would assume that the kind of society that bees or ants have, it wouldn't work if everybody was as individual as they are in a human society. Is that a thought you can pick up on? Or do you think I'm going too far here?
Well, there is... ants seem to be clever more as a group than as an individual. Mm-hmm. But you might still get individuals that are better at foraging than other individuals. Mm-hmm. You might get the ones that tend to lead the trails and the other ones follow.
True.
That is possible.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm not sure anyone's actually ever... Well, the problem is we're not very good at telling different ants apart.
True. Yeah, that would be very difficult, I think, yeah.
You'd have to carefully put different coloured marker and patterns and dots on them carefully. And
yeah, maybe nanotech will allow us to do that one day.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we talked a little bit about individuality and group dynamics. I want to come back a bit to the neurodiversity movement. I would agree with you that it's a political movement, which to some degree, I think is a good thing. I mean, with political movements, it's always like, you get some good, you get some bad. Like there's advantages.
It would be helpful if they demonstrated more understanding of autism.
Yes, and I think that's...
And more understanding of the breadth of autism.
Yeah, I think that's where it already gets complicated, because like we have this idea of autism that started somewhere, I think, in the 1910s with the concept of autistic schizophrenia. Is that a terminology in English as well? That's what it's called in German.
Well, that's what the papers call it.
Exactly, yeah. And then a couple of years down the line, so there's someone in Russia who I think started writing about autism in the 1920s, a woman from Russia whose name I can't recall right now. And then, but unfortunately her studies never garnered much influence, because, I mean, she was from Russia and they were kind of behind that curtain. And then you have Asperger's and Kanner. They come...
But Asperger, because he wrote in German, didn't come to the notice of the English-speaking world until, what, the 1980s or something?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere in the 1980s or in the 1990s, a woman from England, whose name I also don't have in my head right now, she discovered his works and started publishing about his works, and that's how he got back on the radar. But yeah, I think Kanner is the one who coined the terminology in the 40s, isn't it?
Well, there was a guy called Bleuler.
Yeah,
coined the term autism.
He worked together with... He was like the predecessor of Kanner. They are connected, right?
I think so, yeah. I'll put it this way, both Kanner and Asperger, and probably this Russian woman as well, were familiar with his work.
Yeah, but Kanner is the first prominent figure, isn't he?
Given that he wrote in English, and English became the kind of lingua franca, that's why he was kind of prominent, because for most English speakers, what's not in English doesn't exist.
Okay, and so I have very negative associations with Kanner. You seem to be, from what I read on your website, you seem to be somewhat sympathetic towards his theories. Now, I gotta admit, I've never read about his actual theories.
It's not necessarily to say I agree, with all of these people, When I spoke about Asperger, people, but he was a Nazi and he sent people off to be killed by the Nazis. You dig a bit deeper, you find that's not completely accurate.
Yeah, it's not that simple, but to me,
it's not that simple.
Yeah, but I don't really care about what the person did. I care about what theory did he write? Like, is that valid?
So basically, all of these people, there's going to be stuff that you're not going to agree with. You have the refrigerator mother
That's
theory.
the thing that I was going to talk about. Why I don't really like him that much.
We don't have to agree. We don't have to agree with that, right? But you can take his descriptions. Both of them, both Kanner and Asperger, wrote at length about descriptions of the children they were trying to help. Right? Whatever their political views, whatever their reasons. Their descriptions by themselves are actually quite useful.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I was interested. I wanted to know more explicitly, like which parts of their work are important to you. Okay. Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
You don't, the bad bits, you don't have to take the bad bits. Nobody gets everything completely right.
Yes, that would be another problem with the political movement part, because in the political movement, they're not so much interested in what did that person contribute to the cause, but how can I define my political position by opposition to, or maybe...
Yeah. But because it's a political movement and because they don't understand autism, they stand no chance of making things significantly better because there's this whole thing of disabled by society, but it's impossible for society to fully accommodate autism.
Yes.
It's impossible.
That is also not something I personally would ask for.
Yeah, but just to give two simple examples. It's impossible to accommodate someone who's hypersensitive to sound and hyposensitive to sound both at the same time.
That makes a lot of sense. That's a simple way to explaining it. Yeah, that's very good.
I'll give you another example. Social chit-chat is actually all about the exchange of emotion. Now, some autistic people can do that, others can't. My estimate is it's about 50-50 based on my experience, but that could be wrong because everything is based on the sample of people that you have seen. It may not be a representative sample. Well, that ought to be taken with caveats, but you can't tell those who can do the social emotional reciprocity, the exchange of emotion for social chit-chat, which is what is so rewarding about social chit-chat for them, and tell them they should not do that in order to accommodate the people who can't do that. That's not reasonable.
Yeah.
Another way that society can, it shouldn't even consider doing a blanket adaptation for those who can't be. That's just... Instead, what you need is understanding of individual different kinds of autism. But actually, you don't even need to go as far as the autism because everyone is different. Everything that's found in autism is also found in the general population. So you start from the general population without any autism or ADHD or whatever, and you get people to understand how they are different from each other. And we have a training course that does that. You're very good at attention to detail. You're more of a strategic thinker. Now, it's helpful if those two kinds of thinkers understand that how they think differently to the other one, because otherwise there's lots of miscommunication and lots of frustration. You've seen it?
Yes.
So even understanding differences in processing speeds. Because the people who tend to be witty and think fast on their feet tend to assume that everyone else can't do that. And if they can't, well, they must be stupid. But that's not true. Whereas some of the ones who process more slowly can process more deeply and may come up with a better solution.
Yes.
And it's put that way. It's about understanding the basic cognitive variety within humanity.
That's one of my favorite lines from what's it called again? The most famous song by Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. Yes. In Stairway to Heaven, there's the line, in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. And that, I think, is a line about slow thinking, slow processing. And a beautiful one.
Yeah. But you see, if people understand that other people think differently and how other people might think differently, then you can start accommodating individuals. And then you can start taking it to extreme and start to understand autism.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board with you on that, because I think that what would help.
But please don't start a political movement about that.
For now, I'll just try to finish the sentence properly. I think it would help autistic people and other people who fall under the neurodiversity umbrella. I think it would help them a lot if the thought dawned in general society that that other person I'm talking to, doesn't matter if they are autistic, ADHD, or whatever, or nothing, that other person does not think and perceive like me. If that is something that everyone was aware of, that would be so helpful.
And if you had some idea of the range of different ways in which different people think and perceive the world, and you have some idea of which questions to ask to find out how, we'll have a lot less frustration and a lot less miscommunication.
You see, and then I kind of have to think of the whole LGBTQ thing, because I grew up in the 90s in a Germany where most people were ignorant of homosexuality. And as I grew older, people became more aware of it. And now people understand. Me as a man, I could go to a woman and try to flirt with her, but along the way, I might find out that she's not into men at all, and then I can just stop. Or a woman might have the same experience. She talks to a really suave guy, but then she finds out, oh, he's so charming because he's a homosexual. And then, she understands what that means. And back in the day when people were very ignorant of those things, they might not have understood, and it might have led to frustration. And then I look at the social and political movement that the homosexuals had, and I'm thinking the result is now that society in general is more aware of it, and it has lessened the troubles they find in life to some degree. And if we could have that process for autism, I wouldn't mind. If there was more awareness out there that people just think differently, that they perceive differently, that they process differently, and that I'm not to assume that the person in front of me thinks and perceives just like me, then...
Well, you don't even... What I'm trying to say is, actually, if you start with people who are labelled neurotypical, but the neurotypical category doesn't exist because everyone's different. So if you start with people who don't have a label, don't want a label, they are sufficiently varied that if you start to understand that's a good first step, and then you can expand that out to autism and ADHD.
Now, I'm tempted to agree with you that no labels is best, but then I think like the situation for autistic kids in Germany at schools at the moment, it's abysmal. So we used to have a two-tier system with special ed schools and regular schools. And although back in the day, all the autistic people would default to special ed schools. Now, they're being put in regular schools. But, you know, it's kind of like, when was it? I think in 2006 was when Germany signed that UN treaty that has inclusion in it. And there was politicians just said, now we have inclusion. And now the disabled kids will go to the regular school. And that's all they did. No afterthought on it. Just that's what happened. And then
education's there's a lot of problems with education. Well, that's moving us into a whole new set of problems, and that's education, which wants to treat everybody as averages.
Yeah, well, wait. Before we get into the details of education, I kind of wanna aim at something.
You've got the education thing. You've got the problem that there's now massive overdiagnosis of autism and ADHD, and you've got a disaster.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you. Like.
And that's before we go into details.
Yes. The thing that I was going to say is that an identity is necessary to amass political power, because you need a thing that you can talk about, and there you need the label. And I would argue that political power would be necessary to improve the situation at schools. That is just something I wanted to say. Like, I think.
But you need the political power to actually understand what it's talking about.
That is true. I agree with you.
Which, at the moment, when it comes to neurodiversity, it doesn't. And that is a lot of the problem.
Yeah, I think there's just too many edge cases coming together. Like, autism is rather rare. I think ADHD is a lot rarer than we diagnose it. I think we totally overdiagnosed that one. And then there is the whole problem that the way we treat kids in general these days in society is abysmal. And a lot of it is developmental delay that can look like autism or that can look like ADHD. A lot of it is kids that are traumatized, and that can look like ADHD or autism. So, yes.
And then you've got kids not getting outside enough, not getting to run around, not getting to play with other children.
Yes. Yeah, the phone-based childhood. Have you come across that term?
I haven't come across the term, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's Jonathan Haidt wrote a book, The Anxious Generation, and that's like, he talks about, we used to have the play-based childhood, now we have the phone-based childhood, which has replaced the play thing. And I mean, I work...
We need to get back to a play-based, because the movement-based is vitally important,
yes.
I've been discovering, for being able to learn.
Yes. Too much screen time, too much swiping. I mean, I work at a school where almost all of the kids are on the spectrum. But it multiplies the problems with autism. It multiplies the problems with autism if they have too much screen time. If they spend too much time just swiping, no embodied experience, no synchronicity with other human beings. Like, if that's lacking, it's just terrible what it does to the kids.
Well, let's go back to AI. Big problem with AI and understanding is you can give it all the text you like, regurgitate them, it can make stuff up, it can find the patterns, it can make stuff up. At the end of the day, it has zero knowledge, experience of the world. But it can amass piles and piles of stuff about the world, but it's got no way of knowing what those things actually mean, because it's got no tangible experience with the world. So if you have children spending too much time on video games, on phones, or whatever they're doing, they end up living in a world that's not real.
Yeah. It's true.
And we need to get back to reality.
Yes.
And children need to live in reality, not in fantasy. Now, fantasy is a very important part of growing up.
It is.
And it's an important part of play.
It is.
Well, but it needs to be done physically, not on a screen.
Also, I think...
Some of it does.
Yeah, also, I think there needs to be a difference between fantasy and reality.
Yes.
Like, I can imagine myself as a hero in a cape that flies. But I'm not going to climb up a tree and jump down because I'm going to break my legs. Because I know that I can't fly. I can imagine that. And I can imagine what it would be like flying. I can make rules about what a world would be like if I could fly. But once I start trying to fly, that's going to go bad for me. And I think with all of the digital experience that people have these days, I think it really influences that. For instance, think of identity. How our idea of identity has changed. And back in the day, like when I started playing video games, you would play a video game and it would be like picking up a book. There would be characters, and the characters are as they are. And back in the days, I would play a video game and I would be Mario. And that is who I am. Super Mario now. I can jump, I can eat mushrooms and grow, I can shoot with the rose, I can shoot fireballs with the rose I pick up. That is who I am. Like, the game doesn't start with me configuring what Mario looks like, which gender he has, what hair he has, what kind of beard he has, or whatever. I don't get to do that. I have this character and that's the character I play. But in modern video games, they always start out, you get to configure what your character looks like. You get to create your own identity. And I think that social media networks, they kind of do the same thing. You get to create an avatar of yourself. And I mean, the first thing that girls do is they will look at the camera this way because they think that's their good side, and so on, So there's so much make-believe. There's so much, like, you get to choose everything. You get to pick everything. You get to make yourself up. But in reality, you don't. In reality, I'm not a particular strong guy. And I can go to the gym and train a lot. But I'll never get to the point where some of my friends who naturally have a different body, where they will get to. But I can think about really big, complex things. And when I talk to them about some of my friends who might be better bodybuilders, I talk to them about these really big ideas. And they're like, whoa, that's too much for me. Like, I have these settings, that I have these talents, I have these properties about me, and they can't be changed. I can work at them to some degree, but I'm not the architect of myself. I don't design myself. I don't get to make myself up. But in a video game or in the social media world, I get to do just that. And it seems to me that some people then, especially kids who grew up in that world, they seem to think, in real life I get to do that too. Like, I'm uncomfortable with my biological sex, I can just change it. And they're not aware of the consequences that comes with that.
Or of the amount of effort it takes to change things about yourself.
Exactly. Because at the computer, it's just a click. I click and now I have white hair instead of black hair. In reality, if I have black hair, I would have to bleach it first, and then I have to, what's the name? Put white color on it. Yeah, exactly. It takes effort, but the digital world makes it seem so easy that you can just change everything about yourself.
But in the real world, if you don't live in reality, then that tends to lead to mental health problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you live a lie, now and again it'll all fall over and
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm definitely open to your skepticism or your criticism of the neurodiversity movement. But then I'm also like, again, I look at these other groups, like homosexuals, for instance, or people who would be the subject of racism. I see how they were able to make advancements for their group. And I kind of want advancements for autistic people. I want advancements for whatever ADHD is. I'm not entirely convinced that it's...
if you go right back to the beginning to Judy Singer, because I've got Judy about her thesis and about the beginning of the movement. Now, I think Judy Singer's intentions were honourable. I think her heart was in the right place. Now, it's fallen over for her for several reasons. One is that she actually had no understanding of autism. She comes from a science background. She comes from a sociology background. And the movement got taken over by those who claim to be autistic but aren't.
Yes, and that's kind of the same thing that happened to the trans movement. That's kind of the same thing that happened to the lesbian movement, to the gay movement. Yeah, and also to the racial movement, which, like, that was really baffling to me. That one woman from the US who claimed she was transracial. She's like genetically weird word, but genetically she's white, and I'm using the term white in the sense of how it's used in the US right now. But she claimed that she was black, and she actually claimed that she was transracial, that while she was born of white people, she felt black, and therefore her black identity needed to be affirmed. And some people from that movement, some people who were anti-racist, some people who, like, they started out, they just didn't like Nazis, they didn't like it when people who were migrants or who had a different skin color were being discriminated against. That's where they started out. And some of those people who were about that, about anti-racism, actually affirmed that woman for a while until it became more obvious that she was a fraud. But I see that all of these identity movements, they all have the problem that people who claim that identity come in there. And they tend to take over. And I think that the trans movement is a very good example where some of the most well-known trans activists are complete and utter lunatics. They're just obviously people who are in it for some self-interest that they have. Like there's this one person that is somewhat known in England, Eli, I don't know what, and that person openly admits that they sell hormones, that they have some channels where they get hormones from, and they sell them to underage, to minors who will not get that kind of stuff from a doctor, And those people are at the front of the movement, completely fringe people with complete fringe ideas, but they dominate that movement, and they eventually ruin the reputation of trans people in general. And so that is something that I'm definitely wary of, that it will happen to autistic people as well.
You can see it already happening. You can see people who certainly not autistic, getting an autism diagnosis, quite often from a neuroaffirmative diagnostician, who then set themselves up as a mentor or a coach for autistic or ADHD people. They, basically, and they write books, and that the whole thing is just to make money out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's already happening, and those who really have autism, especially the more severe kinds, are just completely marginalized.
Yeah, but then I'm interested about your thoughts on this. So there's the woke thing, which plays a part in all of this. And the woke thing tends to bring with it certain beliefs that you have to affirm, otherwise you get kicked out of the movement. And now autistic people are known to be people, they are less affected by social pressure. And the woke movement, a lot of its power comes from social pressuring. And I'm wondering how that will work with the autistic crowd, because
basically it's the non-autistic crowd who claim to be autistic that are taking it over. But I'm going to have to go.
Okay, like right away.
Well, fairly soon, because I've got somebody stuff up soon.
Okay. So that's very abrupt. I usually tend to try to get somewhere, but yes, we went all over the place.
You've got plenty of material.
Exactly. Okay. So what I like to ask my autistic guests at the end of the podcast is, what is autism to you? What does it mean?
That in the current situation is becoming really, really difficult. For the simple reason that autism is now becoming whatever you like. It's becoming a dumping ground for all kinds of different things. So you kind of have to go back to the beginning to find out at least what it was, even if that's not what it is. But I suppose for me, autism is having an identifiable barrier that prevents you learning social interaction.
But I don't want to take up too much of your time, but do you think that becomes less of a problem when you're amongst only autistic people?
Well, the thing is, autistic people tend to not engage in hidden meanings. They tend to mean what they say and say what they mean. And the communication's more literal. You know, if you think about small children, their communication's literal. They haven't learnt the social nuances yet. So that's why autistic people tend to communicate with each other better. You know, a non-autistic person looking in might think they're all being very rude to each other.
Okay.
And that's where you get the communication problem. But non-autistic people don't want to speak in that kind of way because then they think they're patronizing people.
Yes, I would agree with that.
That's what autism means. It's a barrier, an identifiable barrier, prevents you learning social interaction.
All right.
Which at least is a clear definition.
Yes. Like a lot of the times when I ask that question, people are like, "Oh, that's a difficult one," and then, yeah, but this was very clear. You're on point on that. That's good.
Yeah.
I want to thank you.
And those barriers can be to be with how you think. often to do with processing. It can be sensory issues, like you might not be able to stand being around people. You might not be able to cope with the emotion they throw at you.
Mm-hmm.
It can be because of focus issues. If you look at Wen Lawson's thesis about having kind of tunnel focus,
Mm-hmm.
that's a barrier to learning social interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some of the barriers. Not being able to translate your thoughts into words is another barrier.
Yes. That is something I struggle with as well. But I would argue that just categorical thoughts are bigger than words. Words are just like a shadow of something that is actually three-dimensional. You know?
Or more dimensional in my case, but yes.
Yes. Yes. Or
I get up to 5 or 6 dimensions in my head quite easily.
Yes. All right, Elizabeth.
I discovered that during my PhD. I discovered there was something that wasn't working, an optimization algorithm that wasn't working. And I was figuring out why in my head, and I was basically visualizing this 4-dimensional surface. My brain had forgotten I wasn't supposed to be able to do that. But I figured out why it wasn't working.
That's good.
Then realized, but you're not supposed to be able to do that. People aren't supposed to be able to do that. Well, I just did it. Oh, well, so never mind.
Yeah, everyone was convinced that this was impossible, but then someone came along who didn't know and just did it.
Yeah.
All right, Elizabeth. Thank you a lot for taking the time to talk to me today. I hope the viewers will enjoy this talk as much as I did.
You can always have a repeat in a few months' time if you like.
Yes, that would be great. Okay, so thank you a lot for your time, and I think I'm gonna stop the recording at this point.